I never told my son about my $45,000 salary. He always saw that I lived modestly. When he invited me to dinner at his wife's place, I decided to see how he would treat a poor person. But when I opened the door, good day, dear listeners. It's Clara again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. For 37 years, I worked as a school librarian in a small town in Ohio. My salary never exceeded $45,000 a year, and I never mentioned that figure to my son Jason. Why would I? He saw how I lived: a modest ranch house, a 10-year-old Honda, clothes from outlet stores. I clipped coupons, brought lunch to work in Tupperware, and kept my thermostat at 65 degrees in winter. To anyone looking from the outside, I was exactly what I appeared to be: a widow getting by on a teacher's pension. What Jason didn't know was that I had inherited a considerable sum from my late mother's estate 8 years ago. Nearly $400,000, carefully invested, never touched, never mentioned. I lived the same way I always had because that was who I was. The money sat in accounts, growing quietly, a safety net I hoped never to need. Jason had always been a loving son, or so I thought. He called every Sunday, visited on holidays, sent flowers on my birthday. But something shifted after he married Kimberly 3 years ago. The calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. And when they did come, Kimberly's eyes would sweep over my worn furniture, my outdated kitchen, with something I couldn't quite name. Pity? Disgust? 6 months ago, Jason called with unusual excitement in his voice. "Mom, Kimberly and I want you to come for dinner next Friday. She's been wanting to get to know you better. She's making a special meal." My heart warmed at the invitation. Perhaps I had been wrong about Kimberly. Perhaps she genuinely wanted to build a relationship with me. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. What time should I arrive?" 6 o'clock? "And Mom," he hesitated, "maybe wear something nice. Kimberly invited her parents too. She wants to make a good impression." Something in his tone made me pause. Wear something nice? As if I usually didn't? But I pushed the thought aside. "Of course, dear." That week, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. Why the sudden invitation? Why include her parents, people I'd met only twice, briefly, at the wedding? I remembered how Kimberly's mother, Patricia, had looked at my department store dress that day, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. I decided to conduct a small test. I would arrive exactly as I always appeared: my usual self, my usual modest presentation. I wanted to see how they treated someone they believed to be poor, how they treated me when they thought I had nothing to offer them. Friday arrived cold and gray. I drove my old Honda across town to their upscale neighborhood where houses sprouted 3-car garages and professionally landscaped lawns. Jason and Kimberly's house was a gleaming 2-story colonial with white pillars, purchased, I knew, with help from her parents. I parked on the street and walked up the long driveway, carrying a simple apple pie I'd baked that morning. My coat was 7 years old, clean but faded. My shoes were practical flats. I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be: a retired librarian on a fixed income. I rang the doorbell, hearing it chime expensively inside. Footsteps approached, the door swung open. Jason stood there, but he wasn't alone. Kimberly appeared behind him, and the expression on her face made my blood run cold. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't welcome. It was irritation mixed with something darker: contempt. "Oh," Kimberly said, her eyes traveling from my shoes to my coat to the homemade pie in my hands. "You're here. Not hello, not come in." Just those 3 words, delivered with the warmth of a January wind. Jason's smile looked strained. "Hi, Mom. Come in, come in." But he didn't move to hug me. He didn't take my coat. I stepped inside, and immediately I saw them. Kimberly's parents, Patricia and Robert, sitting in the living room with wine glasses, dressed as if for a country club event. They looked up at me, and I watched Patricia's nose literally wrinkle. "This is Jason's mother," Kimberly announced, as if introducing an unfortunate obligation. Patricia's eyes swept over me with unconcealed disdain. "How nice of you to come," she said. And the pause before nice spoke volumes. Something twisted in my chest. Was this really how my son lived now? In a house where his mother was greeted like an embarrassment? "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, Kimberly said curtly. "Jason, take her coat. Put it somewhere in the back." Somewhere in the back? Not the front closet. Somewhere hidden. I handed Jason my coat, watching his face carefully. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a family dinner. This was something else entirely. But what? I sat on the edge of the sofa, my apple pie still in my hands, because no one had offered to take it to the kitchen. Patricia and Robert continued their conversation about their recent cruise to the Greek islands, as if I weren't there. Kimberly disappeared into the kitchen. Jason stood awkwardly by the doorway, checking his phone. "Jason, dear," I said softly, "could I have some water?" He looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, sure, Mom." He left the room quickly, almost gratefully. I was alone with Kimberly's parents. Patricia took a long sip of her wine and turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So, you're retired now?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes, for 5 years now." "And you manage? On the pension?" The way she said pension made it sound like food stamps. "I manage just fine, thank you." Robert leaned forward. "Must be difficult. Everything's so expensive these days. Healthcare, utilities, food." He shook his head as if contemplating my tragic existence. "I don't know how people survive on those fixed incomes." I felt my spine straighten. "I live within my means. I've always been good with money." Patricia laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Well, that's admirable. But at your age, you shouldn't have to worry about pinching pennies. You should be enjoying life." What did that mean? I was about to ask when Jason returned with a glass of water, and Kimberly emerged from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready," she announced. "Everyone to the dining room." The dining room table was elaborately set with china I'd never seen before, probably a wedding gift from Patricia and Robert. There were place cards. I found mine at the far end of the table, separated from everyone else by a large centerpiece that partially blocked my view. The meal was salmon with asparagus and wild rice. It was well prepared, but the conversation around the table felt choreographed, artificial. They talked about their jobs, their vacation plans, their investments. Patricia mentioned their new lake house. Robert discussed his stock portfolio. Kimberly talked about the kitchen renovation they were planning. I was not included in any of these conversations. I might as well have been invisible. Halfway through the meal, Jason cleared his throat. "So, Mom, Kimberly and I have been talking." Here it was. The real purpose of this dinner. "We're concerned about you," he continued, not looking at me. "Living alone in that big house. At your age. I'm 68, Jason, not 90. And it's a 3-bedroom ranch, not a mansion." Kimberly dabbed her mouth with her napkin. "What Jason means is that it must be exhausting, maintaining a house, doing yard work, worrying about repairs." "I hire a teenager to mow the lawn, and I haven't had any major repairs in years." "Still," Jason persisted, "we think it might be time to consider other options." My heart began to pound. "What kind of options?" Patricia set down her fork. "There's a wonderful facility not far from here. Sunset Meadows. Very well maintained. They have activities, healthcare on site, meals prepared. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. A nursing home. They were suggesting I move into a nursing home. I set down my own fork carefully, keeping my voice steady. I don't need a nursing home. I'm perfectly healthy and capable. It's not a nursing home, it's assisted living, Kimberly corrected, as if that made it better. And it would free you from all the burdens of home ownership. Think of how much easier your life would be. My life is already easy enough, thank you. Jason reached across the table as if to take my hand, but the centerpiece was in the way. Mom, we're just thinking of your future. What if something happens? What if you fall and no one's there? I have a medical alert button. I have neighbors. I have friends. And what about the expenses? Robert interjected. Property taxes, insurance, utilities. On a fixed income, those things add up. If you sold the house, you could use that money for your care. There it was. The real concern. My house. My modest, paid-off house that they thought I couldn't afford to keep. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become this person? Or had he always been this way, and I'd simply refused to see it? I'm not selling my house, I said quietly. And I'm not moving into any facility. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Kimberly's smile became rigid. Well, we're just trying to help. But if you want to be stubborn, I want to live my life as I see fit, I interrupted. I've earned that right. The rest of the dinner passed in cold silence. I left before dessert was served, carrying my untouched apple pie back to my car. As I drove home through the dark streets, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I began to form a plan. I needed to know exactly what they were up to. I needed proof, and I knew exactly where to start looking. The next morning, I called my attorney, Margaret Chen. We'd known each other for 15 years. She'd handled my mother's estate and had always given me sound advice. Margaret, I need to ask you something confidential, I said, after we'd exchanged pleasantries. If someone wanted to have me declared incompetent or gain power of attorney over me without my consent, what would that look like? There was a pause. Helen, is someone trying to do this to you? I don't know yet, but I need to understand the process. She spent 20 minutes explaining the legal pathways. Someone would need to petition the court, provide evidence of incompetence, medical records, testimony from doctors, examples of poor judgment or inability to care for myself. They could also try to convince me to sign documents voluntarily, claiming it was just in case or for my protection. The most common scenario I see, Margaret added, is adult children who convince elderly parents to sign power of attorney, then use it to access bank accounts or sell property. Often the parent doesn't realize what they've signed until it's too late. Could you do me a favor? I asked. Could you draft a letter affirming my mental competence, something I could keep on file? I can do better than that. Come to my office Monday morning. We'll prepare a complete protective document package, updated will, healthcare directives, durable power of attorney to someone you trust who isn't Jason. Just as a safeguard. I thanked her and hung up, feeling slightly better. But I still didn't have proof of what Jason and Kimberly were planning. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Sunset Meadows, the assisted living facility Patricia had mentioned. The director, a cheerful woman named Susan, gave me a tour. It was clean, well-maintained, perfectly acceptable for someone who actually needed it. But it was institutional. Scheduled meal times, shared activities, small apartments with thin walls. Do you get many inquiries from family members? I asked casually. People looking for places for their parents? Oh yes, all the time. Sometimes the seniors themselves come to look. Sometimes it's their children. She smiled warmly. We always encourage the whole family to visit together so everyone's comfortable with the decision. What if the senior doesn't want to move in? Her smile faltered slightly. Well, ideally, it's a mutual decision, but I'll be honest. Sometimes family members tour the facility without the senior's knowledge, just to have options ready. They mean well, but I always advise including the person in the conversation. Has anyone inquired about me recently? Helen Morrison? She blinked, surprised. I'm not supposed to share that information. Please, it's my own life we're talking about. She hesitated, then glanced at her computer. Let me just say that if someone had made an inquiry about availability and pricing for a Helen Morrison about 3 weeks ago, I couldn't confirm or deny it. But hypothetically, I would tell you to have an honest conversation with your family. My stomach dropped. 3 weeks ago, before the dinner invitation. This had been planned. Thank you, I managed. You've been very helpful. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel. They had already started. They were already making plans to warehouse me like unwanted furniture. My phone buzzed, a text from Jason. Mom, I'm sorry about last night. Can we talk? Maybe coffee tomorrow? I stared at the message. The old Helen would have rushed to accept, eager to smooth things over, desperate to believe her son had good intentions. But the new Helen, the one who'd seen the contempt in Kimberly's eyes and discovered the secret inquiry at Sunset Meadows, knew better. I needed more information before confronting him. I texted back, I'm not feeling well, maybe next week. Then I called my neighbor, Dorothy, who'd been my friend for 20 years. Dorothy, I need a favor, a strange one. Anything, dear. If Jason or Kimberly come to my house when I'm not home, or if they ask you questions about me, would you let me know? Of course. Helen, is everything all right? I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to find out. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and wrote down everything I knew. Dinner invitation with Kimberly's parents present, witnesses. Pressure to sell house and move to assisted living, secret inquiry at Sunset Meadows. 3 weeks before the dinner, emphasis on my fixed income and inability to afford my home. Complete disregard for my stated wishes. They were building a narrative, a story of a struggling elderly woman who couldn't care for herself. A woman who needed to be saved from her own poor judgment. But why? What did they gain from putting me in a facility? And then it hit me. My house. Even in this modest neighborhood, it was worth at least $250,000. Paid off, no mortgage. If I went into assisted living, they could sell it. Keep the money for my care. And I would never see a cent of it. I had walked into that dinner thinking I was testing them. I had no idea they'd been testing me first. The game had already begun, and I was several moves behind, but not anymore. Monday morning, I sat in Margaret Chen's office as she laid out documents across her polished desk. This is a durable power of attorney designating your friend Dorothy as your agent, she explained. This healthcare directive specifies your wishes regarding medical treatment. And this is an updated will that's crystal clear about your intentions. I signed each document carefully, witnessed by Margaret's paralegal. The will was simple. Upon my death, my assets would be split between 3 charities I'd supported for years and a scholarship fund in my late husband's name. Jason would receive my mother's silver tea service and my father's watch, sentimental items, nothing more. Margaret, I need to ask something else. Can you send a letter to Jason? A formal letter on your letterhead stating that I've updated my estate documents and that you're my attorney of record. She raised an eyebrow. You want him to know you've made changes? I want him to know I'm not as helpless as he thinks. Consider it done. The letter went out Wednesday. By Friday, my phone rang. Jason. Mom, I got a weird letter from some lawyer. What's going on? Why are you changing your will? I'm simply updating my affairs, Jason. It's responsible estate planning. But why didn't you tell me? Why do I need to hear about it from an attorney? The same reason you didn't tell me you were inquiring about assisted living facilities 3 weeks before inviting me to dinner. Silence. Long and damning. Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. Sunset Meadows, Jason. They keep records. More silence. Then, look, we need to talk, face to face. This is getting out of hand. I agree. Come to my house tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Just you. Kimberly should be there too. Just you, Jason, or we don't talk at all. He came alone. I watched from the window as he parked his BMW in my driveway, sat there for a moment, then walked to the door with his shoulders tight. I let him in. We sat in my living room, the same room where he'd played with trucks as a child, where we'd watched movies together, where I'd helped him with homework. Mom, you have to understand. We're worried about you. Stop lying to me. My voice was steady, cold. I know what you're doing. The question is why. His face flushed. We're not doing anything. We just think, you think I can't afford my house. You think I'm a burden. You want me in a facility so you can sell this place and pocket the money. That's not. He ran his hand through his hair. Okay, fine. Yes. Kimberly and I have been discussing it, but not for the reasons you think. Enlighten me. We're drowning, Mom. The words burst out of him. Kimberly's parents co-signed our house, and they won't let us forget it. Her mother critiques every decision we make. We need to buy them out, get them out of our lives, but we don't have that kind of money. The house you're living in, barely maintaining, it's just sitting here. You don't need 3 bedrooms. You don't need a yard. And if something happened to you, you'd inherit nothing, I said quietly. I changed my will. Everything goes to charity. His face went white, then red. You what? You heard me. He stood abruptly. This is insane. You're cutting out your own son? Over what? Over us caring about your welfare? Caring? I laughed, a harsh sound. You humiliated me at dinner. You made inquiries behind my back. You tried to manipulate me into giving up my independence. We were trying to help. No, Jason. You were trying to help yourselves. He paced the room, agitated. You know what? Fine. Keep your house. Keep your money. But don't come crying to me when you fall and break a hip and there's no one there to help you. I won't need to. I have friends. Real friends. He stopped at the door, his hand on the knob. Kimberly's going to lose it when she hears this. I'm sure she will. She's going to want to fight this, get lawyers involved, maybe have you evaluated. The threat hung in the air. If you try to have me declared incompetent, I said softly, I will make sure every person in this town knows what you attempted. Your colleagues, your neighbors, your in-laws. Do you really want that? We stared at each other across the room that held 38 years of memories. I don't even know who you are anymore, he said finally. The feeling is mutual. He left, slamming the door. I sat in the sudden silence, my hands shaking. I'd stood up to him. I'd drawn a line. But at what cost? That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I felt exhausted, hollowed out. I called Dorothy and told her I was taking a few days to rest. I unplugged my phone, drew the curtains, and let myself cry for the son I thought I had and the relationship I'd lost. For 3 days, I barely left my bed. I grieved. But grief, I learned, can transform into something harder, something like resolve. On the 4th day, I woke up feeling different, clearer. The grief was still there, but beneath it was something steely and unbreakable. I plugged my phone back in. 17 missed calls. 12 from Jason. 5 from an unknown number. 3 voicemails. I listened to the first voicemail. Kimberly's voice, syrupy sweet. Helen, it's Kimberly. Jason told me about your conversation, and I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We never meant to upset you. Please call me back. We need to work this out as a family. The second was Jason, his voice strained. Mom, Kimberly wants to apologize. Can we come over? Can we talk this through? The third was from the unknown number. A man's voice. Mrs. Morrison, this is Dr. Richard Blackwell from Comprehensive Senior Care Services. Your son Jason has contacted us about scheduling a cognitive assessment for you. Please call our office at your earliest convenience to arrange an appointment. My blood ran cold. A cognitive assessment. They weren't backing down, they were escalating. I called Margaret immediately. They can't force you to take any assessment, she assured me. Ignore it completely. Don't engage. If they try to petition the court, we'll fight it, and we'll win. You're clearly competent. Should I be worried? Only if you start doubting yourself. Don't let them shake you, Helen. I spent that morning in my garden, pulling weeds, thinking. The November air was crisp and clean. Mrs. Patterson from next door waved as she walked her terrier. Helen, haven't seen you in a few days. Everything all right? Just needed some rest. She came closer, lowering her voice. That son of yours came by twice, knocked on your door, looked in your windows. I almost called the police. He what? Tuesday and Wednesday. Just stood there, trying to peek inside. I asked if he needed something, and he said he was worried about you. But something felt off about it. I thanked her, disturbed. They were watching, waiting for me to crack. That afternoon, I did something I should have done weeks ago. I called my friend Paula, another retired teacher who'd gone through a similar situation with her own daughter. Paula, can we meet for coffee? I need advice. We met at the little cafe downtown. Over lattes, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. Helen, they're following a playbook, she said, when I finished. It's exactly what my daughter tried. First, they make you doubt yourself. Then they isolate you. Then they create a paper trail of concern. The cognitive assessment, the doctor's calls, it's all evidence they're trying to build. What did you do? I built my own evidence. I volunteered at the library. I took a community college course. I joined a book club. I made sure I had witnesses to my competence. People who could testify I was sharp, active, engaged. She reached across the table. You need to be visible, Helen. You need to live your life loudly. She was right. The next day, I signed up to volunteer at the local animal shelter. I joined the community theater group as a costume assistant. I enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the senior center. I made sure to chat with people, to be seen, to be remembered as capable and vibrant. And it felt good. Liberating. I'd been living quietly for so long, I'd forgotten the pleasure of being part of a community. A week later, a large envelope arrived via courier. Inside was a letter from Kimberly's father, Robert, on his law firm's letterhead. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was chillingly professional. It expressed deep concern about my recent erratic behavior and poor judgment in financial matters. It suggested that, for my own protection, I should consider appointing Jason as my power of attorney. It mentioned that they had consulted with medical professionals who recommended a comprehensive geriatric evaluation. The letter ended with a thinly veiled threat. We would hate to see this matter require court intervention, which could be costly and stressful for everyone involved. I read it 3 times, then calmly placed it in a folder labeled Evidence. They thought I would be intimidated. They thought a letter on expensive letterhead from a lawyer would make me fold. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I called Margaret and read her the letter over the phone. This is actually good for us, she said. It shows their intent. Keep it. Keep everything they send you. That evening, Jason called. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, we received your lawyer's response to Robert's letter. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. We're your family. We love you. Why are you shutting us out? I deleted the message. They could send letters. They could make calls. They could watch my house. But they couldn't touch me. I was done being afraid. 2 weeks passed in relative quiet. I threw myself into my new activities. At the animal shelter, I worked with the cats, socializing the shy ones. At the theater, I helped with costumes for their winter production of A Christmas Carol. My painting instructor praised my watercolor of autumn leaves. I was documenting everything, taking photos, keeping a journal of my activities, collecting testimonials from the people I worked with, building my armor. Then, on a Tuesday evening in late November, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Jason and Kimberly stood on my porch, looking somber. Jason held a white paper bag, takeout from my favorite Chinese restaurant. I considered not answering, but something told me to face this head on. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Mom? Jason's smile was tentative, almost boyish. We brought dinner. Your favorite, mushu pork. Can we come in, please? We want to talk, really talk. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. They settled on my sofa. Kimberly had dressed down, jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a casual ponytail. She looked young, vulnerable. It was carefully calculated. Helen, she began, and her eyes were actually moist with tears. I owe you an apology, a real one. I've been awful to you. I said nothing. When Jason and I got married, I was intimidated by you. You're so independent, so strong. I felt like I could never measure up to the mother who raised such a wonderful man. She wiped her eyes. And instead of dealing with those feelings, I took them out on you. The dinner, the way I treated you, it was inexcusable. It was a good performance. I had to give her that. Jason leaned forward. Mom, we've been doing a lot of soul searching. We were wrong about everything. The assisted living thing was never about the money. It was misguided concern. But we see now that you don't need that. You're thriving. We heard you're volunteering, Kimberly added. Painting classes, theater work. That's amazing. We're so proud of you. Proud. The word tasted bitter in the air. What do you want? I asked flatly. Jason's face fell. We want our family back. We want to start over. You're my mom. You're the only parent I have left. The emotional manipulation was expert. The tremor in his voice, the way he invoked his dead father without saying the words, it was all designed to crack my resolve. And the will? I asked. The letter from Robert's law firm? The attempts to have me evaluated? Kimberly reached out as if to touch my hand. That was all my parents. They were trying to help, but they overstepped. We've told them to back off completely. This is between us. Family. So you'll drop all of it? No more doctors, no more assessments, no more pressure? Absolutely, Jason said quickly. All we ask is that you consider maybe coming to Thanksgiving at our house, a fresh start. There it was. They wanted me back in their territory, back under their control. I stood up. I'd like you to leave now. Kimberly's face hardened instantly, the mask slipping. We're trying to make peace here. You're trying to manipulate me. Again. I walked to the door and opened it. I see right through it. Jason stood slowly. Mom, you're being paranoid. We came here in good faith. You came here because your previous tactics failed. You thought you could sweet-talk me into submission. You thought some tears and takeout would make me forget everything. My voice was ice. I'm not that stupid. Kimberly's tears vanished. She stood, her posture rigid with rage. You ungrateful old woman! We are trying to help you, and you throw it back in our faces. Fine. Enjoy your lonely little life in your lonely little house. Kimberly. Jason put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. No, Jason. She wants to cut us out? Let her. But don't come crawling back when you actually do need help. When you're sick and alone and there's no one there. She turned to me. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret, I said quietly, is not seeing who you both were sooner. They left, Kimberly's heels clicking angrily down my front steps, Jason following like a shadow. I closed the door and locked it, deadbolt, chain, everything. Then I went to the window and watched them argue in the driveway. Kimberly was gesturing wildly. Jason looked defeated. Finally, they got in their car and drove away. My hands were shaking, my heart pounded. They'd shown their true faces tonight, the anger, the contempt beneath the practiced smiles. And it scared me. But fear was fuel now. Fear meant I was fighting for something that mattered. I picked up my phone and called Dorothy. Can you come over? I need a friend. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The week before Christmas, I received a certified letter. Court summons. Jason and Kimberly, with Robert and Patricia named as concerned parties, were petitioning for guardianship, citing my diminished capacity, refusal of necessary medical evaluation, and reckless financial decisions. The hearing was set for January 12th. Margaret met me at her office that same day. This is what we've been preparing for. Don't panic. We have everything we need. They're really doing this. They're desperate. The sweetness didn't work, the threats didn't work, so now they're going legal. But Helen, they're going to lose, spectacularly. Over the next 3 weeks, Margaret built our case. She gathered affidavits from my doctor confirming my excellent health and mental acuity, testimonials from the animal shelter director, my painting instructor, the theater group leader, all describing me as engaged, responsible, and sharp. Bank records showing prudent financial management, the documentation of my volunteer work, my active social calendar. And we had their communications, the threatening letters, the evidence of their secret inquiries to Sunset Meadows, the record of the unsolicited cognitive assessment request. Margaret smiled grimly. They're going to walk into that courtroom thinking they're rescuing a confused old woman. They're going to walk out humiliated. The hearing was held in a small courtroom on a gray January morning. I dressed carefully. Professional, but not flashy. A simple navy suit, my mother's pearl earrings. Jason, Kimberly, Robert, and Patricia sat on one side with their attorney, a sharp-looking woman named Ms. Vance. I sat with Margaret on the other. Judge William Hartley presided, a man in his 60s with skeptical eyes. Ms. Vance presented their case first. She painted a picture of an isolated widow living beyond her means, refusing medical care, alienating her loving family, making irrational decisions like disinheriting her only child. Your Honor, the petitioners are here out of love and genuine concern. Mrs. Morrison refuses to acknowledge that she needs help. She's become hostile, paranoid, and resistant to any intervention. Kimberly took the stand, dabbing her eyes. I just want her to be safe. She's all alone in that house. What if something happens? She won't even talk to us anymore. Jason testified next. My mother used to be warm and trusting. Now she's suspicious of everyone, especially her own family. She's changed, Your Honor. Something's wrong. Robert added professional weight. As an attorney, I've seen this pattern before. Elder isolation, paranoia, poor judgment. Early dementia often presents this way. It was convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed them myself. Then Margaret stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Helen Morrison to the stand. I walked to the witness box, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Margaret smiled at me. Mrs. Morrison, how old are you? 68. And what is today's date? January 12th, 2026. Who is the current president? I answered every cognitive question flawlessly. Then Margaret shifted gears. Mrs. Morrison, can you tell the court about your current activities? I described my volunteer work, my classes, my social engagements. I was calm, articulate, detailed. And your finances? Are they in order? Completely. I live on my pension comfortably. I have no debt. My house is paid off. Margaret nodded. The petitioners claim you made reckless financial decisions. Can you explain what they're referring to? I updated my will to leave my estate to charity rather than to my son. Is that reckless? No. It's my legal right and my considered choice. Margaret entered our evidence, the documents, the affidavits, the testimonials. Then she pulled out the letter from Robert's law firm. Your Honor, I'd like to submit this threatening communication from Mr. Harrison, attempting to coerce Mrs. Morrison into signing over power of attorney. Mrs. Vance objected. That letter expressed concern. It threatened court intervention if she didn't comply, Margaret interrupted. It's coercion, not concern. Then came the evidence from Sunset Meadows. The inquiry made weeks before they'd even spoken to me about assisted living. Judge Hartley's expression darkened. Margaret called the director of the animal shelter, who testified I was one of their most reliable volunteers. The painting instructor, who said I was sharp and creative. My doctor, who confirmed I was in excellent health with no signs of cognitive decline. Finally, Margaret turned to the petitioners. Your Honor, this isn't about Mrs. Morrison's well-being. This is about control. When she refused to sign over her power of attorney, when she changed her will, they retaliated. This petition is punishment, not protection. The courtroom was silent. Judge Hartley looked at Jason. Mr. Morrison, when did you last have a meaningful conversation with your mother? Jason stammered. We've tried, but she won't. Answer the question. Several months? And yet you claim to be concerned about her daily welfare? The judge's voice was sharp. He turned to me. Mrs. Morrison, do you wish to have any contact with these petitioners? I looked at my son. Really looked at him. No, Your Honor, I do not. Petition denied. Judge Hartley's gavel fell like thunder. This case is dismissed. Mrs. Morrison is clearly competent, and her autonomy will be respected. Court is adjourned. In the courthouse hallway, Jason tried to approach me. Mom, please. Margaret stepped between us. My client has requested no contact. Respect that, or I'll file for a restraining order. His face crumpled. She's my mother. Then you should have treated her like one. I walked past him without a word, my head high. Behind me, I heard Kimberly's voice, sharp and accusatory. This is your fault, Jason. You said she'd never fight back. You said she'd be easy. Their argument echoed down the marble corridor, but I didn't turn around. I had nothing left to say to them. Outside, Dorothy was waiting by her car. She'd come for moral support and had sat through the entire hearing. She hugged me tight. You did it, she whispered. You won. But it wasn't over yet. 2 days later, I received a call from an investigator with the State Attorney General's office. Mrs. Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen. We received an interesting packet of documents forwarded by Judge Hartley. Documents related to your recent guardianship hearing. Do you have time to talk? I met her at a coffee shop. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. The judge flagged several concerning elements in your case, she explained. The coercive letters, the attempted financial manipulation, the false medical referrals. We've been investigating your son-in-law, Robert Harrison, for other matters. Your case fits a pattern. What kind of pattern? Elder financial abuse. He's done this before, helped clients gain control of elderly relatives' assets under the guise of protection. Usually the families settle quietly, but you fought back, and now we have documentation. She pulled out a folder. We've subpoenaed his records. 3 other cases in the past 5 years with similar fact patterns. Elderly parents or relatives suddenly deemed incompetent. Assets transferred to adult children he represented. Properties sold. We estimate he's facilitated the misappropriation of over $2 million. My hands went cold. And Jason? Kimberly? We're investigating their involvement. At minimum, they attempted to defraud you. At maximum, they're part of a conspiracy. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. My case wasn't unique. I was simply the one who'd refused to be a victim. There are other families? I asked quietly. Yes. And because you fought back, we can now help them too. Some of them didn't even realize they'd been manipulated. Your courage gave us the evidence we needed to crack this open. The weight of that settled over me. This was bigger than my personal betrayal. This was about protecting vulnerable people from predators who wore the masks of loving family members. The investigation took 6 months. During that time, I lived my life freely. I traveled to Boston to visit an old college friend. I took a watercolor workshop in Vermont. I dated a retired history professor I'd met at the theater group. Nothing serious, but pleasant. I was reminded that life could be joyful. In June, Detective Chen called. We're filing charges. Robert Harrison, Jason Morrison, and Kimberly Morrison. Multiple counts including attempted fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Will there be a trial? Unlikely. Robert's already negotiating a plea deal. His law license is gone either way. Jason and Kimberly are trying to claim they were manipulated by Robert, but we have their communications. They knew exactly what they were doing. The plea deals came through in August. Robert Harrison, disbarred, 18 months in prison, restitution to his victims. Jason and Kimberly, guilty pleas to attempted fraud and elder abuse, suspended sentences with 5 years probation, community service, and mandatory ethics counseling. The conditions of their probation were specific and humiliating. 200 hours of community service at elder care facilities, monthly check-ins with a probation officer, mandatory financial counseling, and a prohibition on serving as power of attorney for anyone for 10 years. Patricia Harrison filed for divorce within a week of Robert's sentencing. The public filing cited irreconcilable differences and moral bankruptcy. She kept the house, the cars, and her dignity, or what remained of it. The local newspaper ran the story. Small town, big scandal. I didn't read the articles, but Dorothy showed me the headlines. Prominent attorney sentenced in elder abuse scheme. Son and daughter-in-law plead guilty in attempted fraud against elderly mother. People I barely knew stopped me on the street to tell me how brave I was. Some shared their own stories of family betrayal. The commonality of it was heartbreaking. In September, I received a letter forwarded through Margaret's office. Jason's handwriting. Mom, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know what we did was unforgivable. I was weak and greedy, and I let Kimberly and her father convince me that we were helping you. I know now that we were only helping ourselves. I've lost everything, my reputation, my friends, my self-respect. Kimberly and I are divorcing. I'm moving out of state to start over somewhere no one knows what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I need you to know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I hope someday you can remember that I wasn't always this person. That once, a long time ago, I was your son. And you were proud of me. I'll carry the shame of what I did for the rest of my life. Jason. I read it once, then filed it away. Maybe someday the words would matter, but not today. I had learned a hard truth. Love without respect is worthless. Family without integrity is just biology, and I deserved better than both. In October, I finalized a new will. The bulk of my estate, including the appreciation from my invested inheritance, would fund scholarships for first-generation college students. My house would go to a nonprofit, that provided transitional housing for domestic abuse survivors. I was leaving a legacy that mattered, and I was finally free. A year after the court hearing, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined. The retired history professor, William, had become a fixture in my life. We spent Sunday mornings at farmers markets, Wednesday evenings at the community theater, Saturday afternoons exploring antique shops or hiking trails. He'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier and understood grief and resilience. We took things slowly, companionably. Two people who'd learned that happiness doesn't require drama. He made me laugh. He challenged my opinions on books and politics. He held my hand during movies and brought me coffee in bed on lazy mornings when he stayed over. It was a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Everything my relationship with Jason had lacked in those final years. "You know what I love about you," William said one evening as we watched the sunset from my back porch. "You don't need anyone. You choose to be with people. There's a difference." He was right. I'd learned the difference between dependence and choice, between obligation and desire. I'd joined the board of the domestic violence shelter that would eventually inherit my house. The work was meaningful, helping develop programs, fundraising, mentoring survivors. I finally understood what my mother must have felt when she donated to causes she believed in. Money could be a tool for good, not just a source of conflict. At the shelter, I met women who'd escaped situations far worse than mine. Their courage humbled me. I shared my story at a fundraising event, and afterwards, 3 women approached me privately. They were dealing with adult children trying to manipulate them financially. I connected them with Margaret, who took their cases pro bono. The cycle of protection continued. My painting had improved enough that I sold 2 watercolors at the community art fair. The money went straight to the scholarship fund I'd established. Small victories, but they accumulated into a life of purpose. Dorothy and I took a cruise to Alaska, something we'd talked about for years, but never done. We saw whales and glaciers and felt like adventurers. We were planning a trip to Ireland for the following spring. I had coffee with Paula every Thursday, comparing notes on life, books, grandchildren. She'd reconciled with her daughter after the daughter divorced her manipulative husband. Sometimes forgiveness was possible. Sometimes the story had a different ending than mine. And I'd stopped waiting for Jason to call. I'd stopped hoping for reconciliation. That particular grief had settled into acceptance, and acceptance had opened space for new relationships, new joys. Meanwhile, across town, Jason's life had imploded. Through the small-town grapevine and Dorothy's remarkable intelligence-gathering network, I learned the details I never asked for, but somehow always heard. Jason had indeed moved, but not out of state. He'd relocated to a small apartment on the rough side of town, the kind of place he used to drive past without seeing. His accounting job had terminated him quietly. They couldn't keep an employee convicted of elder abuse, even with a suspended sentence. His professional license was under review. He worked now at a big-box retail store, stocking shelves at night. The pay was minimum wage. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd thought his mother couldn't survive on a fixed income was now living on one himself, and a far smaller one at that. Kimberly had filed for divorce within weeks of the plea deal. She moved back in with Patricia, who'd kept the house in her settlement with Robert. Mother and daughter, united in their bitterness, blamed Jason for everything. The story they told was that he'd manipulated them, that they'd been trying to help, that his greed had destroyed their family. I heard through Paula, who heard from her hairdresser, who heard from Kimberly's former yoga instructor, that Kimberly spent her days scrolling through social media, watching her former friends live the life she'd lost. She'd been cut from every social circle. The country club had revoked her membership. Her tennis partners stopped returning her calls. I heard Kimberly had started dating a divorced surgeon. She'd already rewritten history in her mind. She was the victim of Jason's schemes, the poor wife led astray. but the relationship lasted only 2 months before he discovered her criminal record. He disappeared without explanation. Patricia had started a blog called Surviving Family Betrayal, where she positioned herself as an elder advocate who'd narrowly escaped her ex-husband's corruption. The irony was exquisite. She wrote long posts about the importance of protecting seniors, never once acknowledging her own role in trying to institutionalize me. The blog had 47 followers, mostly spam bots. Robert served his 18 months at a minimum security facility. He was released in November, disbarred and unemployable as an attorney. Last I heard, he was working as a consultant for a document processing company, making a fraction of his former salary. He'd filed for bankruptcy, the house, the cars, the country club membership, all gone. His former law partners had scrubbed his name from the firm's website as if he'd never existed. 28 years of practice, erased. But the cruelest blow to them wasn't poverty or social disgrace. It was irrelevance. In the small town they dominated through wealth and status, they were now cautionary tales. People crossed the street to avoid them. Their former friends forgot to send party invitations. They'd become invisible in a way they'd once made me feel invisible. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even pity. Just a profound indifference. Their lives were no longer my concern. I'd taken back my power, and in doing so, I'd released any hold they had on my emotions. One day in December, almost exactly 2 years after that terrible dinner, I was at the grocery store when I saw Jason. He was in uniform, the red vest of the store employee, restocking canned goods in aisle 7. He saw me too. Our eyes met. He looked older, tired. There were new lines around his mouth, gray in his hair I didn't remember. He looked like what he was, a man who'd lost everything. For a moment I thought he might speak. His mouth opened, then closed. I nodded, a small acknowledgement that we existed in the same space, and walked past. In the parking lot, William was waiting in his car reading a book. He looked up as I approached and smiled. The kind of genuine smile I'd learned to value above all things. "Ready for lunch?" he asked. "More than ready." We drove to our favorite cafe, and I didn't look back at the store. That chapter was closed. The new one was just beginning. So what did I learn from all of this? I learned that respect matters more than blood, that independence is precious, that sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is stand up to the people you love most. I learned that financial security isn't about the money itself. It's about having options, having autonomy, having the power to say no. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. I'm 70 now. I'm happier than I've been in decades. I have a partner who respects me, friends who value me, and a purpose that fulfills me. Now I ask you, what would you have done? Would you have given in to keep the peace, or would you have fought for your dignity? If this story resonated with you, leave a comment. Share your experience. We're stronger when we speak our truths. Thank you for listening. Remember, you're never too old to fight for yourself.